Uh, I don't know. I think I feel almost. I wish I could live another sort of 50 years because I think we're going to have a really. Oh, Gordon, hi. I just spotted
Hi,
you.
Jürgen. Hi.
Yeah. How are
Good
you?
to see
You
you.
okay?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to see you.
Good. Good. And you? Yeah, I think I'm looking. I mean, I probably won't see it here, but I think I'm looking forward to the next 50 years. I know people are very negative. I don't see it like that. I see, I'm quite excited really in a
Tell
way.
us more. We want to hear.
Yeah.
What do you see happening?
Oh, I don't sort of refuse to become a kind of prophet, but from my feeling perspective is I see there's a great awakening taking place. I notice it since I've been giving seminars in Germany. There's a sort of element of clarity seeping through with people. There's more and more, and I think it is probably going to be infectious, a bit like a virus. That's how I see it. Because I mean, if you look at where we are at the moment with mental illness, people suffering from mental illness, being in positions of power, like egomaniacs, narcissists, they're in position of power. Of course, that is not sustainable, and that will crush under its own momentum. And underneath, what's happening is a sort of slight virus creeping in. And I call it the clarity virus.
Mm.
It's not very visible at the moment, but we have to remember, compared to the time in the 70s, at the moment we are living in a terrible time. For example, in Gaza, tens of thousands of people died under the most terrible circumstances. But in the 70s, millions died. And we hardly heard about it because we didn't have the media coverage, you know. And also, things are actually getting better. I mean, life expectancy has increased by 20 years since the 50s, and hunger has actually decreased and wealth has increased and things like that. We don't hear about it because we are so focused on fear and the negative things. But there's a subtle change taking place we're sort of missing because we are so programmed by fear, and anticipating bad things that we tend to filter out all the things which are actually taking place, So, I mean, that's just my opinion. That's the way I see it. But I've always been an optimist, Wendy, always terrible optimist. I can't
That's
help
lo-
it.
that is lovely, Jürgen. That's fantastic. So, would you? How would you like to structure this session? What do you have in mind?
Oh, I haven't got any plans. I'm just here. I'm quite happy for you to start the conversation or anybody who wants to know questions. I mean, what I'm gearing up to at the moment, I've got two upcoming seminars in Germany, one in Frankfurt, one in Munich. One is 2 days, one is one day. And yeah, I mean, I'm more sort of geared towards reality, really, now. I mean, we all know there is life after death, don't we? We don't have to
Here, every single person here.
we don't
Here.
have to discuss it. I think what I find so fantastic. I mean, just look at us. We are in all sort of different parts of the world, thousands of miles apart, all here at the same time, communicating with each other. Okay, I mean, and of course, there is no difference between us being here in this sort of physical vibration or, you know, sequency or whatever. But I mean, the same is true. There are people who have gone to another vibrational reality. They are here as well, you know, and that's what we have to bear in mind. They're not miles away. You know, that's not the feeling is, okay, they're dead, they're probably miles away, you know, they're probably moved on. But it's not like that. You know, they are still here. And it doesn't matter whether they incarnated in some other place or not, they're still here. And I noticed it with my mother. I mean, I'm not a clairvoyant, I have to stress that, you know, but I'm operating purely on feeling. You know, I only have to think about my mother and I can feel her presence, you know, and she has been dead since 1995. Okay, so is that kind of sensitivity we tend to we don't pay much attention to, but it's part of our human makeup, this sort of sensitivity, you know. Of course, Gordon knows a lot about that. He sort of can tune into, don't you, Gordon? You can tune into all sorts of people. And yeah, I think this is brilliant that we have the ability in us, but we don't acknowledge it, you know.
Jürgen, in this group, we're very fortunate to have the mediums from the Cosmic Voices Network. Regina is here today, and Regina is almost constantly tuned in. And I don't know, do you remember Karen, my co-host, who was here?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, now Karen died nearly 18 months ago. She died, she crossed over.
Yeah.
And she's been coming through like frequently and loudly. And we've been keeping, Regina's been keeping track on Karen. And so has Gordon. She's coming through to Gordon pretty much on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And
so there you
are. We're very fortunate in this group to have this constant connection with the other side.
Yeah, this is
Regina,
brilliant.
would you speak to that just briefly on how?
I think you said it. I think you said it beautifully, Wendy. We all feel very fortunate when we make these connections. And I don't know, for me, every time, every day, whoever's doing it, whoever's contacting, I'm always surprised. It doesn't matter. I'm always surprised. It's like a guest who shows up at the door with balloons and you weren't expecting them.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an intensity of joy. That's all I can say. Just pure joy. Even when they have to discipline me at times or rein me in because I've gone off on the wrong track, and they say, wait a minute. So it's still great because they do it in such a nice way.
Yeah.
They make you happy to be corrected.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite saying now is there's no life after death, there's only life.
That's true.
You know, and that makes it very much simpler to find the connection, really.
Jürgen, just one quickie here. My favorite question these days is not, is there life after death and so on? It's, does consciousness survive birth?
Yes.
And that kind of turns the whole picture around. But I would say, to be fair, to what extent does consciousness survive birth?
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Is this sort of amnesia taking place? We are sort of shoved into a new set of circumstances where we are exposed to a completely new type of experience. You know, I have given a seminar in Germany in May. It was all about what is life like in eternity. You know, people have the idea, okay, oh, there's eternal life. What is that like? I mean, are we finally ending up on a cloud in bliss? But it's not. It's just an incredible spectrum of experiences, which, when we get to a certain point in our consciousness, I call it unity consciousness, when we have liberated ourselves from the restrictions of our identification, then of course we are free to do whatever we choose to. And what we choose to do is usually acting as a co-worker with higher consciousness. And
just another quick question, right? Addressing your personal experience. Now, I haven't seen all of your videos, but the ones that I've seen depict these beautiful landscapes and environments.
Yeah.
What is has your experience been of relating to other presences in the afterlife apart from the natural environment?
Okay. Yeah.
How do you perceive others, assuming you can identify them as other? What's your experience around that?
My experience is, first of all, of people. People. There's a natural tendency of the human spirit to manifest, no matter what vibrational level they are on, to manifest in a human shape. And very often this can vary. That can be just a presence or an energy field, which is no different to the person we have known. But instead of having a visual appreciation of them, we're feeling an energy. And I can give a very good example. I was on a retreat in Devon. That was a couple of years ago, where I was in a little fishing hut with a log fire and everything. And at one point, I felt really very lonely. I wanted to be alone, but I didn't want to feel lonely. And during one meditation, I asked, where are my friends? And when I went into the deep meditation, I suddenly saw a friend who was not from this reality here, but the feeling was I didn't see them, but he was right in my heart. And it was such an intimate, powerful closeness that it gave me a shock. Okay, and I felt this presence in my heart, but on a very, very close level. Okay, and a moment later, this friend of mine appeared before me as a person. There were two, actually. One was a woman, and then I could see them, and I could still speak to them, but they were still in my heart. Okay, and that was a really amazing experience. Then the woman left me. She ran off, and I knew her so well. Probably thousands of years ago, we may have met on the physical plane. I don't know. I can't sort of specify it. But then she ran off through this field of flowers in a beautiful dress, and she waved at me and danced around and disappeared while she was still in my heart. Okay, so it's this sort of thing. We have the ability to manifest, as people. For example, if we, for example, have been with a friend, let's say, in a previous lifetime as a Roman, and they appear to us in an out-of-body experience in a Roman costume, let's say, but we still recognize them and we see them how they want to see us. For example, let's say we have lost connection, and suddenly they appear to us in their Roman attire. Okay, and there's this sort of the physical form or the shape we try to remember people by. There's just a very superficial aspect of us. You know, what really matters is the core being of this person who is millions of years old. Okay, and that doesn't get lost. Okay, they may wear different clothes, different costumes, and when we want to meet them, let's say 5,000 years ago, or we meet them on another planet, let's say, okay, they may have a completely different external form, but this appearance is just a vibrational thing. Okay, it's just something which it's like on the astral plane, we can instantly materialize things because the matrix is already there, and it can be called into existence, you know, in an instance, and this is what makes it so incredibly difficult to understand. But the only time it becomes difficult if we employ our mind. You know, for example, I had an out-of-body experience where was invited into a house by, I think there were 2 women and 1 man or 2 men. Anyway, and we sort of had a chat, and I said, "How do you make a cup of tea?" You know, and they say, "Oh, well, it's so easy." And before she could demonstrate it, she had a cup of tea, and I tried to make a cup of tea, and it became a really strange object, and I had to sort of use my fingers to trying to put into shape, but that was the wrong thing to do. You know, I employed my mind. What we do when we are really established on the astral plane, we are tuning into a completely different mode. Okay, where we don't employ the mind. Everything is on a different level. And what is so difficult? I mean, what is happening is we have invented AI, artificial intelligence. And I've illustrated a book, and the AI principle is very similar to what's happening on the astral plane. Okay, there's a big database. We have put everything we know on Earth, the human race, everything is put into a database. On the astral plane, there's a cosmic database, okay, which we activate via prompts. Here, for example, the language-based artificial intelligence, we create prompts which aligns information in a way we want them, and it adds other aspects which are determined by the database. And on the astral plane is the same thing. We give a prompt, and the prompt can be an emotion. It doesn't even have to be a thought. It can be emotion, a feeling. And this feeling on this prompt we generate materializes the astral world around us. I was very, very astonished when I realized what a powerful influence feelings have on the environment. Okay, and that goes through the whole spectrum. There are people who create an environment which is totally diabolical, simply because they are programmed to live on this sort of level of expectation or negativity, and they create this sort of environment. And I mentioned before, I met one woman, she was in a concrete cell with no windows and no doors. And she told me she was trapped in here. I said, if you're trapped, she said, I can't go out. There's no way out here. And I said, well, I've got in here, so there must be a way out. And I tried to tell her that it's in her imagination, and I could feel her fear or her mindset that created really hard concrete walls. On the same level, they were really like concrete. You couldn't get through it on the same level. If you're on another level, you can simply walk through it. And when I left her and came back, the concrete cell was gone with her as well, So this is sometimes people manifest things which appear to be permanent, And then, of course, there are thought forms or manifestations which are literally permanent, which have always been there, and they're still there because they are maintained by the minds of the people who live there.
Wow, thank you so much, Jürgen. I think that was one of the most, if not the most articulate expression I've ever encountered of the relationship between the personal mind, the mind in general, and the planes of various planes of manifestation. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I was one of the things one of my own, probably the most fascinating experience I've personally had is of meeting someone in the physical who had been dead for 2 years. And that's that more mind-boggling than manifestation or environment.
Yeah.
How does that work? I'd heard about things, and of course, in situations like the skull experiment, the relatives of participants were manifesting physically in the room and so on. But I don't know, can you shed some light on that?
But the people manifesting physically on this
yes,
on this matter dimension. I can only really talk about what I experienced. I've never experienced it, but I've read about it. For example, there's a really good book by, I don't know whether you heard about him, Carlos Castaneda, The Teachings of Don Juan. Yeah, he's got contact with 2 Mexican shamans. And they were so used to materialization phenomena because this was such a strong part of their culture. They didn't even question it, So they managed to use their astral body. I think Yogananda is another one. In his books where he describes this thing. Shriyukta Shva, sort of manifesting in a physical body, and he hugged him and things like that. And this phenomena is basically that people, they don't see life from the physical point at all anymore. They just see it as an energy. Okay. And it's no big deal once you are so integrated into the levels of energy, to them it's no big deal to manifest themselves in this energy level. The only experience I had personally was that I have been on a very, very high energy level. I would call it sort of unity consciousness. It's a sort of status quo. And then when I project down, so for example, one time I had a physical complaint, and I projected down. I could see my physical body, and I could see the complaint I was suffering from on the astral level, which was basically sparks sort of flying around a black spot on my lower abdomen, which was a hernia I had when we were moving. And I could literally sort of harmonize the energy simply by using my hands, my astral hands. And I think this is how real healing is taking place. It takes place on the astral level, but I don't know whether I would have been able to materialize anything physical. I wasn't really that integrated into these higher states. And also, you need to have a certain interest or motivation to do that, which I never had really.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you so much. Peter, you're on.
Actually, I just had a follow-up question to Daniel. So I've got a bunch of questions for you. I have the unfair advantage over you, Jürgen, in that I've read your books and have listened to many, many of your videos. So you're old hat to me, but you don't know me. So there's a little bit of a disadvantage. But I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on Dan. It struck me long ago in my reading of the various discarnate-related literature, very much including your own books, that there is a direct parallel between what is generally referred to as new thought, which is like a century or more old and comes largely out of an American context and has had a rebirth of interest more recently, which is all about the potentiality of manifesting in this physical world, which I don't have much to say about. But it does strike me that there is an absolute direct parallel that you yourself talk about, for example, in the appendix to Multidimensional Man, where you talk about what you call the superpowers. And you lay out like the power of intent and the power of, I forget them all, but they're all right there in the book.
Yeah.
And these, the power of desire, these map one-to-one with anything you'd find in the New Thought literature, including by people like Neville Goddard, for example. So, and this is not surprising because reality is one, right? This physical reality is a subset, but not absolutely distinct from discarnate reality. But we're swimming through molasses here, so manifestation is really hard here, whereas discarnately it's much easier. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, the reason it's so hard because we live in a world of illusion. We think we are limited, and the belief is so ingrained in us because the moment we are born, we are banging our head against hard objects, and everything is solid, and that becomes our reality, our belief. And it's almost impossible to do anything about it. And the only way we have to do about it, once we are sort of rooted in the higher states of consciousness, it's easier. But do we want to? Do we want to change that? And my personal attitude is, I want to be here in this hard world. Okay, I don't want to change things because that is the sole reason why I'm here, because it is inflexible. It is, it has got limitations, and that gives me the space and the freedom to accommodate limitations and use it as a tool for spiritual growth.
Right.
Not to change it, but to accept it.
That's excellent. Which leads me to my next question, but I don't want to. I'll hand it off to anybody else who has a question before I circle back, unless nobody else has.
Well, thanks, Peter. You just reminded me of the question of apports, which are common in physical mediumship, where objects will appear, disappear. And in the past, I've had several experiences of that. Nothing recently until yesterday.
Okay.
I had a jacket that had a zipper that needed to be repaired. So I got a little tube of super glue. I did the repair, capped the tube, put it on the table, hung up the jacket, came back to the table, and the tube of glue was gone.
Okay.
I promise you, I looked everywhere. It's, in my pockets, in the jacket itself, on the floor, the whole environment. gone.
Yeah.
So that gave me a chuckle. and then it really raises the question of how solid our physical environment really is, and whether that solidity is more an artifact of observation than of any kind of objective reality.
Yes, except in my case, I lose a lot of things. For example, I found my passport after I applied for a new one inside the sofa, a year later and things. So in my case, at least, it has I always come across a fairly natural solution, when I find things.
Well,
but I wouldn't
sofas have this metaphysical characteristic of absorbing keys and passports.
Right. Yes. I mean, I sometimes wonder, what happens to certain things. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this sort of thing.
Dan, just as a quick aside, do you know the book by Mary Rose Barrington called Jot, J-O-T-T, Just One of Those Things?
No, I haven't seen it.
They're full of case studies of just what you're describing. You'd find it fascinating.
What her name is again?
Mary Rose Barrington. And the title is Jot. M-A-R-Y-R-O-S-E Barrington, B-A-R-R-I-N-G-T-O-N. There's a nice article on her under science, the Science Encyclopedia. I can throw it in the chat.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Does anybody have a question for Jürgen? Something that's puzzled them for some time, or something from his books? Hans Wilhelm, can I bring you in on this?
Thank you. Nice to meet you personally, Jürgen. Just one question I would love you to discuss quickly is the oversoul. We all are familiar with it with different interpretation. My question to you is, have you ever experienced something like an oversoul where the person is only materialized for 15 or 20% here on planet Earth and the rest is upstairs somewhere and maybe at the same time in other universes or etc.? Have you ever experienced something like this, or have you always dealt with one entity like a soul, a person, whatever it is? What is your understanding from the oversoul?
Yeah, first of all, I always find when people making this discrimination between soul or oversoul, ego and things like that, I don't make this sort of kind of distinction. I think there's very much language based. To me, everything is consciousness, okay, and focus, okay. Consciousness focuses on certain things, certain aspects of reality. For example, I had an encounter with the feminine aspect of consciousness, which came about when I went to Greece in a monastery, which I mentioned in my videos before, when I was introduced via a monk to an icon of two saints. One was the Virgin Mary and one was Saint Anastasia. And up to that point, I never really understood much about the Catholic iconography and all this. That was very strange to me. I'm not a Christian, But the monk I talked to, I told him I'm really fascinated by these icons. I said I can't go past an icon without stopping and looking at it. And what is it about these icons, And then the monk, he was originally a Buddhist, and he came to wanted to become a monk for this monastery on Mount Athos and join the order. And we became really good friends, sort of talked about meditation, astral traveling. He could astral travel and things like that. And he said, well, basically these icons, they're the monks who paint them, every brush stroke is a prayer. is a devotional act. And he said, I have to show you one of these icons I'm talking about. And he led me into a chapel which had no electricity, was totally dark, and was only allowed for ordained monks. No tourists were allowed into it. And he opened it up, and he said, sit on this chair in front of an icon. And he then lit a chandelier with candles and lowered it so I could see the icon. Okay. And then it was a very strange feeling. I was overcome by a sort of kind of weird nostalgic feeling. And that soon ended up in a kind of hypnotic trance kind of thing. I don't know how to explain it, but suddenly I had this incredible energy which was radiating towards me, and then I was overcome by incredible love, which became so strong that I ended up in a kind of ecstasy. It was so overwhelming, and I had tears flowing, because I couldn't deal with it in any other way. That was totally unprepared for it. And then another thing happened very similar. And then I noticed this radiation was a transmission of a divine feminine principle, which was an expression of an aspect of consciousness, which is love, but a very, very powerful love, which I always sort of attributed to a feminine principle of compassion, of protection, all these sort of things which we sort of ascribe to the feminine aspect, to the mother and things. And this was what happened, it was another awakening of this aspect of consciousness. So going back to your original question, consciousness is limitless. And whatever we focus on, that aspect of consciousness will come into existence or project itself. So when people, for example, experience an oversoul, then there is basically a projection of them wanting to be united with this aspect which they feel may be a superior aspect to what they already know. Okay? And I think this is a projection of people. And
so, Jürgen, excuse me, are you saying in a sense that form is sort of the natural outcome of desire?
Yeah. I mean, the way I see consciousness is basically a space of still energy, which is like a mirror. Okay? And whatever we project into this mirror is magnified by the energy which we carry within us. Okay? So if we project, I remember very clearly when my daughter left college, and I picked her up after she graduated. She said, "Dad, I'm now graduated. What am I going to do now?" I said, "Well, imagine life is like a soup, and all you have to do is make waves and see what comes back." And this is how I see consciousness. You enter into consciousness and you make waves. You use your intent, your focus, your emotions, your feeling. If it's love and you have got a lot of energy, then this energy will be magnified and it will come back to you. Okay, and that applies also to negative things. Consciousness is basically a giant mirror of humanity, and we project things into it and realize it. So the oversoul, basically, I feel, I may be wrong, or other people may have better ideas, is basically something which we project. And I never actually discovered any boundaries either between the astral plane. Okay, there are boundaries in as much we are limited by our inner energy. Okay, so these limitations manifest as a ceiling, which I described in my first book, Multidimensional Man, where I encountered a ceiling and I had to break through it. And the ceiling was my limitation, my own limitation, and it felt like a real concrete ceiling. So we manifest these limitations, which become quite real when we are in these in consciousness. And this is just my experience. I feel what I experience is an incredible dynamic fluidity. And what the other aspect of this fluidity is a feeling of liberation, of freedom. Because I no longer have a need to set myself boundaries. And this liberation is accompanied by a feeling of incredible well-being and stillness. Okay? And that I find is the beauty of what we are about as human beings, that when we break through our own limitations and allow ourselves to embrace this incredible ocean of, I can only describe it an ocean of bliss, really. This is how it feels like. And sometimes when I don't do anything at all, okay, I'm just still in myself, it suddenly materializes. It feels as if I'm walking on ground which is illuminated. You know, I can feel the energy of this ocean of bliss, which is all around us, okay? And if we are still and we open our heart, then we can feel it. We can feel it, and then we are free to focus on it, to activate certain aspect of this ocean, you know, create waves, okay? And that's, to me, that is what we are meant to be doing here, really. To make waves, nice waves.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jürgen.
Does that answer your question? Or did you want to?
That was the best answer I've heard so far about the oversoul. Yes, it was superb. Thank you so much, Jürgen. I appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you.
Dan,
Peter,
back to you.
Peter has his hand up.
I don't want to ask too many questions. I could go on all night, and I want to give other people a chance. But one of my favorite quotes from your friend Mike Marable is, "Jürgen goes places I can't go." Maybe you recall that. And
Yeah.
this ties into, the reason I mention this is because of your discussion just now regarding encountering a ceiling. And for example, if you read the great researcher into all things discarnate, Robert Crookall, for example, his book, The Supreme Adventure, he talks about this posthumous sorting, which seems to be related to vibrational level, and it seems to be related to what might broadly be called quality of soul, refinement of soul, or expansion of soul. There are different words that can be used, none of them that precise. But there's this notion that you can only go as high as your inner state will allow. You can go below, but you can't. There's a cap, a ceiling, beyond which you have to grow into to expand above. And it
Yes.
obviously takes time in a
Yes.
timeless realm, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've encountered that, obviously to a lesser extent than Mike Marable, according to his own statement. In your own, there's limits beyond which you can't go, given your own, let us say, soul development, given where you are, that that others would encounter in their own way as well. Would you agree with that?
Well, I've right from the start, my very first experience in 1973, it was, I had an experience. I've been meditating for about 4 years then, intensively so, sometimes 5 hours a day. I went through, and I had this, which I described in my book, where I had this breakfast experience where I was eating a sandwich and I suddenly lost the connection to my sandwich. It didn't belong to me anymore. And this catapulted me into a state of clarity. I experience it as the absolute state. One can go, and that is it. Okay, it has no attributes. There's nothing you can say about it. It's just the feeling is one of absolute. Okay, and clarity, a clarity which is so profound. There's no bias, no attributes. Okay, it's just clarity. Another word I've coined for it later was neutrality. Okay, there wasn't even something you could identify as love. Okay, that was just an outcrop I experienced when I came back. And before I entered, I had this love experience of being received by an incredible loving aspect. But that took me into this state of profound being of the absolute. And that is something I have never experienced. And from then onwards, this aspect never went away. I knew it was there. I didn't experience it for 50 years. I mean, the next time I experienced was in 1980, which I described also in my book, The Multidimensional Man. And then in 2013, when I went to Scotland, I experienced it again. Okay, but it's very short, the experience. I called it the 10-minute moment, the book. Okay, and I don't think we can experience it as human beings. We can only enter it to know it is there. I don't know what the mystics say, the great yogis, what their experience is, but I don't think it's sustainable.
You're reminding me of Plotinus, because Plotinus talks about like 4 or 5 times in the course of his life, he was able to be lifted up to an experience of the one, but it was a very temporally limited experience, and then he came back down into the body. And that sounds exactly like what you're describing. So that would be one data point.
Yes, so of course, what happened gradually as we acclimatize ourselves to higher states of consciousness, it becomes our status quo, our home. Okay, and I refer to it as a kind of unity consciousness. And the aspect of this consciousness is the experience of stillness. Okay, so there's literally no movement. Is a presence, and Eckhart Tolle speaks about that in great detail. He is always on about the stillness, the present moment, the here and now. But this is what it is and what it feels like. This is a pervading stillness. Okay, and I don't know how you describe it. You could call it God, I guess, or consciousness or whatever. But it's a presence which continuously surrounds us and carries us, okay? And it's no longer veiled. And that is the difference. For example, a good way of describing it is, let's say we're seeing a mountain in the distance which is covered in clouds, okay? And all we see is the level of clouds from underneath. But then we climb the mountain and we get above the clouds, and the cloud layer is below us. And then the cloud layer lifts or breaks up, and we can see very clearly the earth beneath us, but we can see it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And that is the unity consciousness aspect. And that is actually inherent in us. That is our natural state, okay, which we obscure via our illusions we have painted around ourselves. We're creating our limitations ourselves via our beliefs. Okay, but this is our natural state. And that's what I found. It's so natural that it surprises me that not everybody notices it. Or why is it not, front page news?
Thank you very much.
Jürgen, I'd like to ask you a little bit about reincarnation, because I know that I love in your books, you talk about the mandala, of seeing the mandala of all of your previous lives.
Yeah.
A lot of people are concerned about this, that if there is reincarnation, I will lose connection with my loved ones from previous lives. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I mean, the first time I came across this phenomena, I mean, I've experienced my previous lives quite a lot of times, actually. But one issue I had was my father, who died when I was a nine-year-old boy. And during my out-of-body experience, I never met him. And I was very keen to make contact with him. And one day I made an intent to meet my father. And I ended up in a little village in Russia, which I described in my book, Vistas of Infinity. And there were two boys, and they had a bicycle, and one boy I immediately recognized as my father, who was obviously incarnated in Russia as a sort of 10-year-old boy or something like that. And I recognized him immediately. And I saw his brother, who I recognized as his father, who he lost when he was 2 years old to the Spanish flu. And he became an orphan, and he lost both his parents. And his mother was, in this incarnation, his mother again, and his brother was his father. So the family was re-established. And the interesting thing was, when I approached him and called him Papa, okay, he then, in his mind, on the astral level, he said, Jürgen. He asked me twice. So he recognized me on the astral level without necessarily, for example, when he was in his physical body in Russia, there he probably may not even have acknowledged the thought. Maybe it was just one of these fleeting thoughts which may have been in his physical brain, which he couldn't identify as anything of importance. But that was the first time I woke up to the idea of what reincarnation actually means. Okay, so first of all, it means that we are not tied to a manifestation, whether it's the astral manifestation or the physical manifestation. Our real self, the one we identify as the me, the I am, is eternal. And it has got a distinct signature, which it had been developing over millions of years since its incarnation into the material universe. Okay. And before that, it was still a being. Okay. It's never actually did not exist. But this in India, they call it the jiva. It's basically the soul, which is constant, is permanent. It has got all the things which we identify as a person we know, the mother, the father, the brother. Okay, it's got all the aspects which are intrinsically makes them, minus perhaps when we meet them on that level, they may not have certain veils which they assembled during their lifetime. For example, they may have, it's a bit like wearing different clothes. You know, they may have adopted the clothes of a businessman, which was just a temporary garment, or of a school teacher. Okay, but that is not really them. That is just one of the clothes they decided to wear in various incarnations. Okay, but the jiva, the soul aspect, never gets lost. It doesn't matter. And if I meet the person, and I met myself in about sort of 13th century, which I also written down in Multidimensional Man, where I was quite a revolutionary character who went around to the peasant revolts, you know, and we were revolting against the rich then, you know, and I had this experience which bled over into this life, where we humiliated a person who owned this massive estate, and we liberated the people. And they didn't show any gratitude for their liberation, because they suddenly found themselves homeless. And we set fire to this estate and things and humiliated this man. And this man turned up in my present life as a supervisor in a hospital where I was working. And I recognized her. And she absolutely hated me from the moment she set eyes on me. Okay, and I described that in my book. And so these things don't get lost. That's what karma is all about. That's how sometimes we reach back to incarnations which go back hundreds of years. Okay, and I experienced quite a few of these. And of course, to me, it was very important, because each previous life explained to me aspects of my personality, of my trait, why certain things were the way they are in my life. You know, there are certain resistances I had, and they connected to previous lives, which I then recognized and which I had to deal with in order to find sort of kind of transcendence or liberation, to throw away these aspects and liberate myself from them. So very often people who go this path, they encounter these dark aspects of themselves, either in a previous life, or they're confronted with it in some other way.
So have you had any experience of pre-life planning, of people actually, you know, sitting down we read about people talking about they can see themselves in a council, having a choice of lives, of the life they're going to come into. Have you come across any of that?
Yeah, I think this is basically a projection people adopt to see themselves in a council discussing it. I see things slightly differently. I see it more sort of technical. My metaphor for this is basically a quantum computer, where all the data are stored about ourselves and our life. And the way I experienced it was a giant network. When I saw myself, I described it also in Vistas of Infinity, I experienced myself not as a body, but as a network of energy points connected via hexagons in 3 dimensions or more. And each point was connected to other networks. Okay, a big, massive, infinite network of points. And my own personal network consisted what in Hindu mythology is referred to as Indra's net. Okay, and very often we find in certain cultures the ornament of life, or the pattern, or in Islam, they have got the hexagon. On the Jewish faith, they have got the hexagon, or it's basically at the endpoints, it connects infinitely, and at each point is an energy. And where the energies, you can see them, there are big energy points which are bright and luminous, and others they're quite dark or small, and they're flashing around in this massive space. And the way I see it, that consciousness operates this supercomputer, for want of a better word, where it very quickly assembles from the energy points to create a new incarnation. And it works in conjunction with other energy fields, okay, where they say then, okay, there is another person and there's such a strong attraction, so we are going to incarnate together. Okay, but whether they have, I mean, when you are in this field, you can actually properly discuss it. I haven't experienced it, but you project an image of discussing it with other souls from another field, whether you want to meet or so, and that may actually be your experience, that you actually manifest the person you met in a previous life, and you decide, okay, that's my job, that's what I do. But my experience is that it's an almost automatic process, which to me manifested more like energy finding itself and accumulating and working on a principle of mutual attraction. And out of this conglomeration of energy, a new manifestation or incarnation is created. That's just my interpretation. I have to say I'm not very good at finding words for it, because it's such a
well, what do you know? Wait a minute. Jürgen, you have been, in my opinion, in my experience, one of the most articulate explainers and relators of everything. So please give yourself some credit for that.
Okay, but I have to say, when other people come up with different explanation or representation, I couldn't debunk them, because it's what we project, what we perceive, really. That's what counts.
Someone has a question. It's the enviably scholarly Peter Samsel himself who has a contribution to offer.
Oh man, you're setting me up, Daniel. I just wanted to follow. This is something of a follow-up on both Hans Wilhelm's and Wendy's question. And it takes us into Frederick Meyer's teaching regarding both reincarnation and the group soul, which is something I first encountered. The latter is something I first encountered in Meyer's writings. And then once my antenna were up for it, I found it in other places in the discarnate literature. As I recall, I don't believe you talk about the group soul, but correct me if I'm wrong in my memory in that regard. And what I suspect, and for example, Myers, when he talks about reincarnation and beyond human personality, he says, the ordinary individual reincarnates 2, 3, or 4 times, and then they're like out of materiality and moving on, right? And he also says quite explicitly that what people often take as reincarnatory memories are actually memories of other members of their own group soul. And I'm just wondering if you have encountered any teaching about the group soul in your own OBE experiences, and what you might think about that.
Well, my experience of group souls, if you want to call it like that, is basically sort of communities, okay, which are kindred spirits in a way. Okay, they're sort of feel attracted to each other and they make experiences together, which creates an energetic affiliation. And that can, well, we have representations on Earth, of course, very strongly identified people belonging to a certain group, okay? This principle, of course, exists. In fact, everything that exists here has got its origin on the spiritual levels. Everything that exists. This is just a reflection of that. So my experience of group soul is an affiliation of kindred spirits. Without going into any detail about it, I mean, I don't have any specific experience other than the friends I mentioned earlier. When I went to meditation, I met these very close friends, which were actually in my heart. Okay, that is the closest link I could find to other souls. This incredibly intimate connectedness. But other than that, I mean, people find different ways of expressing it. Or talking about it. I don't have any specific experiences, and I can only talk about my specific experiences as such.
Thank you very much. Can I slip in another question? One that I've had for a while, but let me pause. No, Gloria's got her hand up. Never mind. Go ahead, Gloria.
I wanted to comment. I too, not like you. You language things very well, and I have problems finding the words to express what I want to say based on what I feel about mystical things. It's not easy. Our language, and I found something very interesting. It's from Evan Pritchard's book, and in that book, the entities speaking to him, yes, the temple within, they actually apologize, and they say that it's difficult, and I'm paraphrasing, in our language because they use symbols that everybody understands. And our trying to put things into language is not effective. Anyway, the question I have is more about dreams. I'm in a dream group that our Afterlife group holds every 2 weeks. And many of us have had visitation dreams that are completely unforgettable. And it occurs to me that what I consider a visitation dream, where the individual visiting me has appeared in many different forms, but I knew who it was.
Yeah.
I recognized in different forms immediately who that was. It occurs to me now for the first time listening to you that perhaps I was astral traveling.
Yeah, it's very likely. Yes. I mean, most of our dreams are astral experiences, And you're talking two things you mentioned, which I would like to come back to, For example, the idea of the symbols, When I had a teacher, which was a Chinese master, which I described in my first book, Multidimensional Man. And he later took me 6 years later, he took me into a much higher level of consciousness. But he, at one point, at first, the way we communicated with each other, he would give me riddles, which I had to solve. Okay, and I had to go through a doorway which had spears coming through, and I had to find a way to avoid this, and lots of things, tests he did with me, or I was drowning, okay, and I had to overcome these limitations which were of my own making. And then at one point, and he was also talking to me, mind to mind, but at one point he stopped talking to me and he sent me symbols. And these symbols he sent to me, they were not translatable into language. And what they did do, they prepared me to enter a much higher state of consciousness. And by absorbing these symbols intuitively, I learned to assimilate the higher state of consciousness and gradually get to know it. So he raised my vibrations by forcing me to assimilate the language, the new language which belonged to a higher state, which he sent to me via symbols. And I always reminded of crop circles. You know, when you see crop circles, people don't know what to make of them.
Yeah.
You know, they're now employing AI to find a way of analyzing them or identifying them. But the problem is with crop circles or some symbols, there's no equivalent language. There's only an intuitive way of understanding what is actually revealed. Okay, and as hard as we try to use language to unravel what it is a totally lost cause. We just have to tune into a higher state of consciousness, which then gives us the aha experience. Now I know what they're saying, but I can't talk about it because there is no language. And I've got to go back to my book, Elysium, which I illustrated with the help of AI, but it's a very shoddy work, a very bad representation of what I tried to, put down. I could only do it by using the language of pictures which we are familiar with, okay? But the experiences of these realms I went to is far beyond what can be expressed in language or pictures, because it's not just pictures, it's animation, it's sound, it's the appearances of what I saw cannot be possibly put into one medium. So you would have to have sound, vision, and also I tried to explain it the other day in one of my Facebook posts when people criticize AI and things. Okay, it's very bad in describing the real profound experience. You know, I can only sort of go that far. But for example, I try to explain it. I went along a hedge on the higher dimensional plane, which felt to me as if I was brushing along velvet. That was a sensory feeling. It was like velvet, although it didn't look like velvet, but the feeling was like it. Okay? And the appearance, sort of the moment I did that, it turned into drops of light, which looked like a hedge. And so the difficulty is these experiences we have on the higher dimensional levels, they're impossible to translate into any language we know. And hence people, when they try to express what they have seen, they say, oh, the streets are made out of gold, the fruits are made out of diamonds. They come with these sort of kitsch descriptions of something that cannot be manifested in any medium we are familiar with. So what I'm doing as an artist is trying to create something which gives at least a kind of feeling, okay, what it's like. So that's a problem.
Jürgen, do you think it's fair to say that dreams are, in a sense, the kindergarten of the afterlife?
Yeah.
Is
yeah,
that
very much so. I mean, the dreams. Dreams are, they are our doorway into the afterlife. Okay, and that's why lucid dreaming is so important when people learn the art of lucid dreaming, because then we become aware that we are dreaming, and then the next step is we can control our dream, and then that was my mostly how I entered into the astral plane. I was dreaming, and I became aware that I was dreaming, and suddenly the dream characters in my dream, dreams usually have a narrative. They have got a kind of story, something is happening, okay? And when we become aware in our dream, the narrative collapses, okay? The dream characters suddenly disappear, or like in a puff of smoke, and suddenly you are in a here and now experience. And in order to deepen the experience, I focus on what is in front of me. And I look on the ground, or Castaneda said, you look at your hands, okay? But I usually pick up something from the ground. There can be a blade of grass, a stone, and then I focus on it until it becomes really crystal clear. And the more I focus on it, the more I see it, the better, the deeper I see it, the more of the energy I become aware of, and suddenly my consciousness becomes crystal clear. I'm more awake than I am normally awake. And then I enter the here and now state, and then the astral world becomes the reality, and I can then walk around like I do on Earth.
So going back to Gloria's question, is when we have a dream visit, is that what's going on?
A dream visit in our dreams. I mean, we dream about people, for example, we have lost relatives, or people who are our friends. Okay, very often these are astral experiences. I had, for example, experiences of, they were like a dream, but I was astrally aware, but I encountered people who were dreaming in my astral environment. I identified them as dreamers, okay, because there was a certain atmosphere about them, which was a kind of drowsiness about them, and they were still in a sort of illusionary state without being fully awake, or they may act out certain things, or behave in certain ways. Basically, they're dreamers, and I could tell when I encountered dreamers. Okay.
So that's interesting, because I understand that when people are on the other side and they want to get a message to us, they have to learn how to contact us through the dreams. So they almost have to recognize the fact that we're in the dream state and somehow communicate through that.
Yeah, that's the only way. I mean, they're aware of us all the time. The only difficulty is we are not aware of them, because we are not in the same energy level, So we have to actually go to sleep and go into a dream. And then they find it easier to contact us, because then we are more aware of the same energy field they live in. And if they want to give us a message or want to communicate, there is the best chance they have to connect with us, or if we are clairvoyant or mediums. Okay, of course, mediums don't have this sort of separation. They have got much easier access to the astral level, but as normal people, we don't.
So when you're in the astral level, are you able to contact someone else through their dreams? If you're there and you see somebody who's dreaming.
Yeah, I have met friends who had certain problems, and they were dreaming, and I visited them in their dream, and I discussed their problem with them. And I was able to somehow shed light into their problem. And when I met them the next day, they had no recall. They didn't have any idea that we actually talked during their dream time together. If that happens, sometimes it happens. People are more aware of their dream life, who are more lucid. They can actually remember encounters like that. But I have actually, I don't know, I haven't even, there's going to be part of another book. I've got experiences where I entered into people's dreams and try to navigate them through their problems. Okay, and so that is an option which we, when we astral travel, we can do that. We can enter into people's dreams and assist them there. Mike Marable, for example, he is very sort of adept in on this particular near Earth level to guide people, and that's his main job, to seek out people who are stuck, and yeah, I think Gordon has a
Gordon
similar.
does that, and Gordon's teaching a group for us of people how to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So lots of people here, they made it their job to guide people, in the near Earth level situation and get them to move on or become aware.
Fascinating. Gloria, does that answer your question? Did you want to ask anything follow up?
No, it was expressed beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Peter has a question.
I'm sorry to keep cycling through, but I've got lots of interesting questions. Actually, Gloria just beautifully set this up. She mentioned this book by Evan Pritchard, which I just happened to have on my desk, which is why I was able to flash it up. And the reason I had it on my desk, I owe Gary Langley for even knowing about this book, is because it's the only other point in the literature I've found that matches something that you talk about in your own books, which is the use of a word of power or a sacred syllable to raise vibration discarnately or out of body. So you talk, and this ties in when you talking about encountering your discarnate Chinese teacher, which you talk about in your books, and he taught you the use of the sacred syllable Om, which, for example, the Mandukya Upanishad talks about at great length. So in this book, and it may have an Ekankar influence, I'm not sure, it talks about using the divine name Hu, which comes out of the Islamic Sufi tradition. It's basically a personal pronoun name of the divine. And the explicit claim is made that reciting the name of Hu has the power to raise one's vibrational level of weight. And I'm wondering two questions. Do you know of words of power in addition, let me call them words of power, I don't know if that's an appropriate term, in addition to the Om that you yourself was taught and have practiced? And do you have an idea as to how this actually works? I mean,
I was given a word during my meditation, which I used, which I just sort of received. Okay, and it was a very personal thing. So I wouldn't want to, which was particularly in harmony with the state of mind I was in at the time. So it was a personal mantra, which I used for 2 years. Okay, and it was very, very powerful. And I knew what it did, what it achieved, and where it guided me to in my sort of development. And then it lost its meaning, its power. It faded away. And it was a vibration which was particularly geared towards a certain aspect of my soul.
Right.
A bit like a healing mantra, okay, which I use. And then when this period was past, it sort of faded. Okay, I didn't need it anymore. So I wouldn't be able to prescribe it. It's a bit like medicine.
Exactly, right.
So these things are there, and we can, during meditation, sometimes we can receive them, and then we know actually, yeah, that is a word, and we have our faith in it, and we can use it and try it out. And but certain mantras like Hu or Om, and there are others, they are coming right from the source.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're incredibly powerful. And yeah, and I mean, the other thing is I have used the Om mantra when I was not in a mental position to use it, and it didn't work. Okay, I had an out-of-body experience, and it was all very drab and very gray, my environment, and I noticed the reason I was in this state of mind because the previous day I was totally preoccupied with all the misery in the world. Okay, and it brought me right down. And when I had an out of body experience, I was in a desert. And no matter how much I tried to raise myself out of it using the Om Mantram, it didn't work. I lifted off the ground for a short time, but my makeup was rooted to a negative layer. Okay, and so the best way to use it, if you are have an out of body experience, and very often what you feel is a kind of elation, a feeling, oh, good, I've got a positive feeling, I've got an out of body experience, and then using it really liberates you. And it can have a very dramatic, very powerful effect. Right. I mean, I noticed, for example, I was in the middle of a square on the astral plane. When I realized I was out of body, I used the mantra Om, and suddenly the whole world began to shake and people started fleeing in all direction in the village. It was so powerful, and then I was sort of shooting up into the sky, which opened up, and then this sort of glorious sort of reception began, and very often these sort of feelings can take you into very high levels, and these mantras are very powerful. Yeah.
You just touched on a really critical point, which forgive me, but this is so important. I'm going to just bring it up here. And it ties in with the very beginning of the discussion when all this began at the beginning of the session, which is, we're in a very difficult period. And there's always been difficult periods in the world. But, for many of us, we've been watching a live stream genocide in Gaza for the last 2 years. Yeah. Just one example. And for me personally, this has profoundly affected me to the point where I'm kind of obsessive about tracking the news. And I have this feeling that I want to bear witness to it, but at the same time, it's dragging me down to lower vibration states, if you like. How do you deal with that? Because you don't just walk away and turn away, because that feels completely inappropriate as a response, a human response. But at the same time, you can't ground your energy there either.
No, you can't look away from it, because that's where we are. There's our world we have created. Okay, in a way, we are sort of responsible. But what happens with me when I look at things, and it can be the news on TV or whatever it is, I always see stillness. Okay? That's the perception of stillness never goes away. And it's always there. I can even see it on television. Behind whatever they are showing, I can see stillness. And that is always a reminder that's where we belong, and that's where we have to get our sustenance from. So being aware that we are actually living in this divine presence and focusing on it. And the best way to focus it is with our heart. I mean, what these scenes provoke in us is compassion.
Yes.
And love. And, that is a very important reaction to it, because we are not separate. We are part of it. And I think another way of looking at reality is, for example, once we are located in this unity consciousness, this feeling, this stillness, which is always there. We're just not aware of it. But once we are rooted in it and can see past all the other things, we become a conduit. Okay? It's basically, instead of a body, we are a big, powerful cable. Okay? And our feet divert this stillness, or this energy, or whatever you like to call it, this consciousness, this awareness, this being, into the earth, and without actually intending it, we automatically become a conduit of higher consciousness, especially when we are aware of the stillness surrounding us. Then we can even feel it. And that is much more powerful than writing and, than, I don't know, doing whatever we can in the physical world. And so we can achieve a lot. And I think what I feel at the moment, there are a lot of people now, and this is what I'm teaching in my seminars, to make people aware that they are conduits of peace, of stillness. Okay.
I feel like you're saying something very, very important here that I want to make sure I understand appropriately and thoroughly. And maybe I need to sign up for your seminars. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the way forward. But can you comment a little bit further on this being a conduit?
Yes. The seminars I've been invited to in Germany, they are originally started off the teacher who invited me. With his pupils, he discussed the Vedas, the Upanishads with them. This was quite an intellectual group. And I tried to go beyond what the words and say, okay, it's here. It's here. What Manfred is saying is actually what this reality is. You don't have to understand, you just have to experience it. And so I kept bringing this point into it when he talked about Vishnu, Shiva, and then I made it sort of pointed out the reality of the metaphor. Okay, what it actually is, so that people could actually experience it here and then, as a presence. Okay, and I used specific. Sometimes there was no need to say anything. I just had to point out, just look at the candle there in the room. Or he put flowers and just look at the flowers, to bring people into the moment. Okay, and this is what Eckhart Tolle is very good at. He reminds people continuously, forget about the mind, just become aware of what is. And this is the most powerful way to understand reality, to be.
Yes.
Okay. And when we understand that, then what we then notice, the first thing we notice is surrounded by stillness. I remember one day I was at a party and somebody said, "Oh, Jürgen, I read your book," interestingly enough. And I was really pleased. I said, "Oh, yeah, great, and he said, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Come to think of it, I don't think I do." because there's no need to believe in it, because it's always there.
Yeah.
Okay, the moment I start believing, I'm creating a barrier to something which I regard as an otherness.
Yeah.
Okay, there's me and there's God. It's over there somewhere, okay? But in reality, we don't have to believe, we just have to experience it. And the way to experience is stillness, peace. And sometimes, if it gets very intense, it manifests right in front of your eyes as a light.
I'm just going to hand this up so you can see it. This is very topical to what you're saying.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, that's it. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what we have to just bring back into our awareness in everyday life. And we get used to it. It becomes our new standard. Okay. And then gradually all the other things, the compulsion to play a certain role or enter the game gradually loses its meaning or its significance. And suddenly we realize, I don't want to be rich anymore because I've got everything I need. And these sort of little everyday realization sort of gradually enrich our life, and then gradually we become home. That becomes our home turf. Okay, and then we automatically become conduits of it without having to go out and say the end is nigh. We just we just shut up. We don't need to say anything.
I should do that and pass it to Regina.
Regina, your turn.
My turn. Okay. That's a great question, Peter. Great answer, Jürgen. You know, when you were talking about being in the stillness when you're dreaming and you find yourself looking at something and allowing yourself to go in smaller, tighter, clearer focus so that you can enter that point of stillness. For Peter's sake, when life is so overwhelmingly catastrophic with what's going on, I suggest doing the same thing, but right here. And that allows you to enter into that beingness or that stillness. Step outside or even in your house. Focus on an item, whether it's the candle, as you're saying, Jürgen, or a flower, or a bee, or a pebble in the sidewalk. And pretty soon your mind is magnifying that, as opposed to it's being filled with the magnification of your thought of the pebble or the bee, as opposed to the magnification of the chaos.
Yeah.
And so that's a way of practicing how to get into that beingness or that stillness. It's not even a meditation. It's just allowing yourself to have that control when we don't feel we have any control of the chaos that's going around us. We have a great deal, but the control that we're asking for is just allowing the stillness within ourselves.
Yeah.
And that I think would be, and the whole thing that was when you were speaking, Jürgen, I was being shown, of course, symbols. And I saw this big parabola dish cone. It was way out in space. And it said, now, there's Earth. I saw the Earth, and this parabola is way up there in space, big giant cone. And I'm standing behind the cone, looking through this tiny little hole at the center of the cone. And it's focused down there at Earth. and Earth is very far away. And it says, can you see all the little ants? And they're just chewing on each other's legs and they're just running all around. And it made total fun of what was happening, total light about what was being. Because how many times have we actually, as little kids, taken a magnifying glass to the anthill?
Yeah.
And done our own destructive ways. But what it's trying to say is, when you feel yourself so overwrought with the news and so unable to pull yourself out of it, allow yourself to go way out into space and see the blue marble.
Yeah.
Regina, this is actually this is a venerable Stoic practice called the view from above.
Oh, okay.
If you Google the view from above Stoic, it'll come right up. Marcus Aurelius, for example, talks about this in the Meditations. So there's a lot of good, solid background to what you're proposing. Thank you.
Well, I'm not a red background, so I'm just getting the symbols.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of my meditation techniques, which I describe in the book, The 10-Minute Moment, is when people say I focus on the light. Okay, so what it means is I am here and the light is there and I focus on the light. I always say, don't focus on the light, be the light.
Light.
Okay, and feel what it's like as a light. Then you can radiate out. And you're no longer separated from the light. You are then become the sun that radiates out into the world, and you send your blessing out this way. And that is a good way of prayer for change.
Thank you. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And this sort of separation, we have to overcome our separation, and it's quite simple, really. And if we have problems with it, we just have to ask our heart to do it on our behalf. And the heart is very good at radiating out and naturally goes into a love mode. And we don't even have to focus or concentrate. We just allow love to be our guide. Okay, that's another meditation.
So I'm thinking those of us who are trying to send healing or prayer to a particular situation on the earth, would this be a better way of doing it? I'm just like when we those I've always been taught that if you're wanting to send healing to somebody, you visualize them in perfect health, and you try to project that image. But I'm just thinking, what you're suggesting might be better to actually just go into that focus of stillness.
Yeah, you transcend the thoughts. The mental world is a limited world. Okay, our mind is a category below our soul, our unity consciousness. Thinking takes away aspects of energy, which is then used up in making pictures in your mind, in our thoughts. Okay, the direct way is to actually love. Okay, send love without necessarily creating a narrative around it, but just focus our energy this way because it's more spontaneous, it's more instant. We don't have to process it through language, I'm not saying people who use this mode of visualization are wrong. I'm not saying that. It's just, to me personally, it feels more instant to, particularly when people are bereaved, they lost a child, let's say, okay, and then they're overcome by the pain of separation and things. If you employ love for the child, which you know very well because you always loved the child, if you go straight into the love, not only do you overcome or heal the grief, but you're actually connecting to your child with your love. And the child feels it, and you become one. Okay, on a very deep level, you are overcoming your bereavement as well as healing, the separation and things like that. That is the most effective way to connect to our loved ones. Is love. That's why we call them the loved ones.
I'm just thinking, then most religious services rely on words, which is even less effective than images, which is even less effective than presence.
Yeah. The consciousness connects us. We already connected with everything. Unity consciousness. We are in the sea of consciousness, and we just have to focus and use the energy of consciousness, which is love, to bring healing. Okay, and it's a thing which comes from the heart. It's an energy, it's a direct energy which is manifested through the greater consciousness, which is a direct energy which doesn't need to be processed. We just focus and release the energy. If we have a person who is in distress, who needs help, we focus and love. Okay, we don't have to build a narrative around it. Okay, love knows what it's got to do. It's just a direct channel of energy. And it makes things so simple.
Beautiful.
Wendy, thank you for raising that question. And the question it raises for me is to what extent organized religion is more about entrainment than liberation.
Yeah. That's religions very often are more focused on control rather than liberation. And that's a great shame, really. There were only very few saints. I mean, there are some great saints, actually. One of the Saint Teresa of Avila is one of my favorite saints. She wrote a book, The Interior Castle. Okay, she would have been burned at the stake if it hadn't been for her bishop who protected her. But her whole philosophy was about being united with God. She wanted to marry God. The closest bond she can possibly achieve in life is through love. Okay, and these saints, for example, another one is Saint Francis. Saint Francis, another really beautiful person, entity. These people are totally grounded in love because they know there is no more powerful way to become one with God.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about the whole idea of the heart-centered statues in Catholicism. Whether you have the statue of the heart on fire. It seems to be a very higher level.
Yeah, that in my book I described in Multidimensional Man, when I met my master, I was kneeling in front of him, and he was sort of lying back, propped up on his elbow, very casual, in a very casual position. And I was kneeling in front of him, and he suddenly, with his left foot, he started massaging my chest. And I felt really embarrassed. because I thought if anybody came past me and saw me, that would be really embarrassing. But the thing was, he opened my heart chakra. And for weeks afterwards, in real life, I felt a burning in my chest, okay, which was very powerful. And he didn't even talk about it. He just sort of transmitted the energy via his foot without changing his position to massage my chest. And yeah, that's what happened.
Beautiful. Machi, you haven't had a question yet, so we'll give you priority.
Hi, thank you so much, Jürgen. Would you say then that based on your beautiful words about healing and grounding in love, would you say that as mediums then also ground and connect to God with love and therefore to our loved ones?
Yeah. That's the quickest way to connect to our loved ones. The most effective way is using love. Okay, and the way it manifests for them is a light. They're surrounded by light and the energy which lifts them up and creates an automatic response towards us. Okay, and we are creating a bond this way, a connection. Okay, we don't have to think about it, we just love. And they recognize it, instantly, because it's a direct energy which goes from one heart to the other heart. Okay, and they know it. We don't have to talk about it, and I found that is such an incredible, powerful energy for connection. I always say some people I know is incredibly sad when people lose their child. There can be nothing more heart-wrenching than losing somebody you love, or your own child, And sometimes people ask me, what's the best way? How do I get over the pain? And that is love. It has got two aspects to itself. It's a healing. It connects. It closes the separation down. And it brings you closer to the person you are missing. And in time, this bereavement will dissipate because you become aware of the person you deem to have lost in your everyday life.
Yeah. And would you, if you had to describe what love actually is? I mean, I think all of us know abstractly, but would you describe it as a billions of subatomic? How would you describe that?
Yeah, the best way to describe it, because it's a feeling, and feelings are very difficult to describe. But for example, there are entry points to love, and one entry point is appreciation. If you, for example, have a cup of tea and you appreciate the feeling it gives you, or you appreciate the person, the flowers, the day, find something to appreciate the moment you open your eyes in the morning. And then the appreciation is a first opening door for love, so that love is the next step. You feel good, first of all. If you appreciate, you feel good. You have got joy. Joy comes into it. Love and joy are very closely connected. Okay, this feel, if you can get joy, and joy is an expansive feeling. Okay, it opens you up. You want to embrace other people. You want to give them. You want to infect them with the joy. People singing together in a choir. These are all ways of opening your heart, people in a community doing things together. These things are all helping us to learn to love, compassion, stuff like that. And I think when we witness a tragedy in the world which is happening around us, if we show our compassion rather than our anger, for these poor souls who are suffering, then we actually also heal the place, and gradually this healing will manifest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, your turn again.
I wanted to, I was very intrigued by the word Daniel just used regarding his comment on religion, which was entrainment. And it tied very nicely into something I'd been thinking about as a follow-on consideration to our discussion regarding these words of power like Om or Hu. This is a good example of one book I could just pull off my shelves. So this practice of invocation is probably the most universal spiritual practice you find across religious and spiritual traditions. So whether it's the Jesus prayer in Orthodox Christian mystical practice, or the Islamic Sufi dhikrullah, or of course, the Hindu mantra yoga, or japa yoga, or something like the Buddhist Nimbutsu. And so we're talking about, for example, your experience using the Om invocation discarnately to raise one's vibration. But of course, the difference between our vibration, there's a direct continuity between our vibration in the body and the vibration, and thereby the level, if you like, that we inhabit discarnately after we pass out of the body. And one could see an argument that as a kind of follow-on conclusion, that by, say, practicing the Om mantra as a part of a regular spiritual practice while one is embodied, what one is doing is entraining, to use Daniel's word, one's own vibrational level of soul, if I want to put it that way, on the power of the name that is being invoked, or the sacred syllable, so that when one dies, one's entrainment upon that powerful sacred syllable or name actually lifts one vibrationally discarnately. Do I have that right, do you think?
I would say so, yeah, because I mean, of course, there's a difference if we just say the word without.
Of course, it has to be said appropriately.
The thing is, I'm a great believer in using an energy behind mantras, which we generate. We can generate it from almost any chakra, the energy. My personal energy I like to use is a heart, so combine it with love. But you can also, for example, see the light of the Om mantra via your third eye and merge with it this way. It depends how energetically you're configured as a human being.
You can have accompanying visualization practices as part of the embodiment.
Yes.
You see that quite commonly in different traditions.
Yes, you can have a visualization aspect to it. I'm very much in favor of visualizing. It is sort of my natural thing, really.
Of course, as an artist.
Yeah, and we are individuals. We have to find our own individual way. That's why when I talked earlier about the mantra which I discovered, which was given to me, that was geared towards my energy at that time, And this is how we have to see ourselves. We're all different. And some people are more, in the yoga practices, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, there are all these different yoga schools, which work on different aspects of our energetic makeup.
Yes.
Okay. And therefore you can't say, oh, well, this is what you have to do. It just happened to me that to me is an easy access to use the heart chakra, let's say, But other people who are more intellectually, let's say, conditioned or energized, they may find a totally different way access to the same energy, to unity consciousness or consciousness,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jürgen, on that note, I think we're coming to an end of our session. We've kept you here till 11 o'clock your time. What's next for you? You seem to be focusing on these seminars in Germany.
Yeah, that's really important for me, and that is I met her through the internet. I met a really nice woman in Germany. She is the Course of Miracles. Have you heard about?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, she teaches a Course of Miracles to her class. Okay, and she came to me and she said, lots of things you say are very familiar to me. I said, I haven't read the Course of Miracles, but if you say so, And then shortly afterwards, she was handed a letter from a solicitor of the publisher that she had to stop teaching Course of Miracles because it infringes copyright.
Oh my God. Oh, that's dreadful.
And this sort of, I said, oh, well, this is this sort of thing gone. Now you have to find your own thing, see it as a liberation, free.
Well, she could paraphrase it and get around the copyright and still be still be teaching the course.
Actually, I'm somewhat familiar with the copyright regarding the Course in Miracles, and it's actually not been held up in law. It's been challenged legally, and it's been not held up. So
yeah,
she might be all right.
Yeah, but I said to her, "Do you need it? How long have you been teaching it?" She said, "Oh, about 20 years or so." I said, "Well, you probably internalized everything, and so I'm going to meet her, and we're going to run this workshop together." And she thinks I haven't read but when I talk to her, I know exactly we are on the same wavelengths, so we can quite happily work together. And so that's one thing. But it's not so much about life after death. It's more about reality of being, in the present, and getting people who have with her studied the Course of Miracle, the spiritual aspect of it, getting them to experience it.
Beautiful.
So that's the next step. If you study something long enough, there comes a point where you want to experience it, and breaking through the barrier of which is stopping you experiencing it.
Is this advertised on your website?
On my Facebook. My website is at the moment unattended because I lost access to it because the software I was using has been discontinued, and I've got to reinstall it, so it's not up to date. But I'm trying to find my way around it, but it all takes time and effort to get things started.
But on Facebook, you can track Jürgen on Facebook.
I keep making announcement. For example, at the moment, I'm promoting the 10-minute moment as an audio book, so people can download it, and it's quite good because the guy who translated it or who made it into an audio book, I met a few years ago, and he invited me to Italy because he loved what he read, and he volunteered to read it. And he has got a very, very nice voice, like Morgan Freeman type voice, and it comes across really well. And the reason it's so good is because he really internalized it. Okay, it's good. He's done a really good job. I'm really pleased. He's in the meantime, he has made an audiobook of all my stuff. So gradually I'm going to release it.
Wonderful. Yeah. And this is through your Facebook. I'm not on Facebook myself. Can I still get access to it?
Oh yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, on YouTube, I've got. If you seek me on YouTube, there are some new channels of mine. There's one I've done. Wendy, you know it. I recently posted, and you said it was quite good, didn't you?
Yeah, very good. We put it in the report this week in this week's Friday report, so it's in there.
And under the YouTube video, there is more information. There's a link to my book, so you can order it online.
Which book is this? Is this 10-Minute Moment?
The 10-Minute Moment.
Yeah, I have your book. Yeah. I don't have the audiobook though.
No, the audiobook is actually quite good. The guy has got a really good voice, and he is fantastic.
Is this for purchase or is it free for download?
Yeah, you can purchase it.
Okay.
It's a website where you can download audiobooks and stuff, and people pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay. And it helps me, of course, a little bit. I've got all these domain names which come up for renewal and stuff like that, so that helps a little bit. Yeah. So on YouTube, Wendy, you can properly circulate the video which you have done on the Friday report, didn't you?
Yes, we did. We did.
Yeah. Okay, it's
there. I'll promote the audiobook as well.
Yeah. So there's a link to it. And then of course, so it's a link. And I'm sort of going back into the audiobook, into the 10-minute moment. I'm using certain aspects of it and make little videos about it. And this music. And I discovered a really good source of music, which you can turn your narrative into the lyrics. I turned the narrative of my 10-minute moment, certain meditation techniques, into lyrics, and then get it to be sung.
Beautiful. I look forward to listening to that and some of the other things that are coming up. What about the visuals? Are you doing any more visual type work on videos?
I love to. I mean, I've got two things I like to do. I've got a follow-up book to the Vistas of Infinity. I want to make it like a trilogy, if you like.
Right.
There's another book which has been hanging around for the last sort of 10 years in my mind, in my notes. I've got already written 50,000 words, but I need to put it together. And that will be the third book in the trilogy. And I keep wanting to write it, but the last book came in between, which was the last book.
Elysium.
Elysium. That was the one I wanted to do because I wanted to make people aware there is actually a real tangible world.
Yes.
I wanted to show pictures of what I've seen. Okay, and make it really more tangible rather than speaking or writing about it. And because I'm an artist, I've been doing it all my life as a commercial artist. I know all the techniques. And with AI, of course, it's much better because you can program the AI through picture after picture and refine gradually what you really want to say. So the Elysium book, before I had two other books using traditional techniques, which I try to put out. But since AI came along, it's much better because I've done thousands and thousands of images, and then I can program the AI to exactly give it what I want it to show, so that's really powerful. So I'm thinking maybe I want to do another book like that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we're all in anticipation, and everybody here, I think, loves your work. And thank you for making the time to come and talk with us. It's been absolutely wonderful. Would anybody like to give a vote of thanks? Gloria, can I call on you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. Your words bring such clarity to such mystical concepts, and I'm very grateful to you for that. Please come back soon.
Okay. Thank you very much, you lot, for actually spending the time with me. I enjoyed it very much talking to you. Thank you.